of students in the state of Missouri. So if you're doing that, by golly, you're gonna want the laws.
We ready, guys?
I need to go grab my little coach.
Oh, I
I got
didn't know.
another.
Too late.
I'll be honest, the standard most fear as much as the test do.
Mhm.
You'll see the bill come back around next year. I've actually talked with them about developing the test instead of using these smarter ballots.
And please include educators.
Yes.
The
That was
answer
actually
from-
part of 1247, test questions would come from educators, developed from the standards that are developed by the state of Missouri, and we keep the money in the state and have
That's the other thing.
state of Missouri develop.
The biggest, and here's the thing, people say that teachers are gonna make the questions easier so that the kids can pass them and the teachers look good. No way. All the teachers that I've ever been in contact with, they challenge their students and they make the questions harder, but they make them age appropriate. And that's one of the biggest things there.
Well, if it were up to me, and actually 1247 had you testing throughout the year, that was a cumulative test at the end of the year, because then you're not doubling up and you can.
Exactly.
I'm really surprised to hear that there's a possibility we're gonna write standards. And there was still a possibility we're gonna take a Common Core test. I thought it was, we're getting out of the Smarter Balance Consortium, we're out.
The first year we cannot.
I'm talking about after 2 years. So after 2 years, it's still a possibility that we will be taking that test?
There is not a definitive way to take the test in 14.9. It says that you will look at the assessments and change those to meet the standards that you all develop, which would in essence take us out of Smarter Balance because it's not developed on the standards you come up with. But there's nothing in there that says how the test will be developed.
Right,
I'm
okay.
saying I want to move it to Missouri and we take control of it.
Yeah.
Because writing the big check that we write for assessments, I would just assume keeping our universities, or at least in the state.
I think the University of Missouri did a good place.
And they
And
have,
I-
And I'm sorry, I didn't.
That's okay.
I
You
didn't
introduce
know
yourself?
What's your name?
I'm representing David Wood.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice to
different
meet you.
university,
Mark,
and
Mark,
Bob.
Yeah, maybe the one.
I brought that question up this morning when we had our meeting about the assessment. And they pretty much answered like I was crazy about wanting to keep it in state and have our input. So I didn't know if they weren't understanding my question or
They
the frustrations
probably
we've
didn't
had
understand
in
the
the
question.
past with not, if we're putting this much effort into keeping it local. I don't want the people in Alaska grading my writing prompts or my kids or my stuff or creating
Well,
what they,
and I think, you know,
it's just my concern.
God bless the state of Missouri, we have a very diverse area. So when we develop questions that are good in my district, Versailles, Missouri, the kids in Normandy won't have a clue what they're talking about.
But if they're following us,
Well, I mean, in terms of the question structure, so if the kid in Normandy gets a question of how much hay does a horse have to eat to make the trip from Excelsior to Versailles and back without getting hungry, what the heck's a horse, why is a buggy, there's none of that, they're into buses and transport and passes. So when you develop a question that's localized, you need to be able to adjust and take those questions. So if I'm a teacher in Versailles and I get a question on mass transit, my kids have never seen mass transit.
absolutely.
So I need to be able to toss that question out and pull one in that would be more applicable to my environment. And I think that should be part of, and actually on your interim assessments on third, fourth, fifth, sixth, the short test, the teachers do have the ability to write like questions. It's just in the fifth and eighth grade that you're going to step.
Well, thank you
So
for your support.
we need to make it as local controlled and as applicable to our local environments and still cover the standards. I'm not saying they need to be different standards.
Yeah.
But in how you phrase questions can make a difference.
I would worry though how we're preparing kids for college and career ready. If our only focus is local, because I grow, I think of my own 4 children who live in the county, who live in a rural area. They're very aware and interactive in the city because they live so close to whether they go wherever they go.
And as long as they're testing the standards, I'm a math teacher, so I think more in math than I do in social studies. No offense. But if I calculate the numeric values and put the word problems in perspective, the calculations are the same no matter how I word the problem. In social studies, there is no difference. Local governments are the same in the city as they are in the counties. So your history is the same, whether you live in the city or in the country. So it's not near as applicable to me as science and math probably are, in terms of being able to do that. Now, I also had the issue, and I'm taking up your time, I'm sorry. I need to leave you alone. But we need to bring awareness, not necessarily through the testing, but we need to bring awareness into our local classrooms. I took the mobile tour this past week and had the opportunity to tour Pfizer, Monsanto, SLU, WashU, the nuclear reactor in Columbia, the vaccine makers in St. Joe. We've got a lot of great industry that deals with STEM, but we're not getting that information out to my local district as to what jobs are available to at least keep our kids in the state. I don't have a factory hardly to keep my kids employed or to aspire to, much less something in the sciences or engineering in my district. So at least if I can keep them in the state, instead of losing them to the East Coast or West Coast, we're better off. So there's a balance there, but I think with local control and test, we can have a better job of meeting that balance.
Thank you so much for coming by.
I hope I didn't mess up the process.
No, you're fine.
You guys are doing great work. This is fantastic. And I'll stop and leave it alone.
Since Patrick's not here, let's move for a vote.
I looked up in the SORAC region. Other synonyms for that would be area, district, county, section, province, state, expanse, constituency, borough, territory, zone, or locality. And I'm not really sure that helps us a whole heck of a lot. But there you have
I
it.
was thinking borough is a round hole.
I thought that's what they did.
But that's country, right? Here's a typical country versus city. A borough in the city is what? A section of the city. Borough in the country is something a groundhog or something crawls into and stays.
Section might cross.
What did it say in the
Donkey,
document?
Really?
What is it, is it Boxer?
That's what we're talking about.
That's a standard that optimizes.
Not even in there.
Is really.
All of it is locality, rather than local.
Locality and section.
But
Because we could talk about section.
what you ended on today, before we left, I'm kind of what started the local thing.
Oh, it was you.
Yeah.
Aha.
But I'm kind
Okay.
of landing back on community now because we just can't use the word local. So I'm out.
I think locality maybe. Was that one?
Slashing.
Maybe
I
that's
wanna
water
go,
gave
I
us
wanna
such-
go community local. Or local something else. I don't wanna just put local by itself.
I thought you were asked local to be hard on
If it's by itself. I'm not comfortable with it just being, I don't think we need three
See
things
if I have
anymore,
local in it.
but I think there needs to be some kind of bridge. Because I don't want it to throw teachers. I mean, I think about my kid last year in second grade, and if he was learning about local stuff, I don't know.
Community
Maybe I'm
local.
too close to it, so y'all just,
Community, local, state? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know what I'm saying. I'm saying we've got a good foundation, and then I think we know where we wanna end, and maybe we confirm where we wanna end and then smash the middle, like how we bridge it, or we just keep going. Because here's where the controversy is gonna come. If you look at the Post-it notes, I think fourth grade is kind of okay, and then maybe fifth grade's okay, and then second, third, and fourth are kind of where everybody had different opinions.
So,
So if there's one that's easier to agree upon, so let me look real quick. Okay, this is region, nation, region, state, historical timeframe. This is national, region, world, historical timeframe. And then this is state, region, county, historical timeframe, and then this is the mess. But for me, it's easier if I know where I'm going to be able to get there.
So we can come back.
We don't have to come back, but if there's one we can agree on, I don't know, what do y'all think? Do you think we easier agree on fifth grade or just keep going?
That's the well of the group.
That's what I'm asking, I don't care either way.
Well, we're missing Patrick, so it's just discussion right now, informal discussion. But, you know, yeah.
Right, so if I know fifth grade is going to be national,
No, I mean sixth grade. What's sixth grade?
Yes, so, yeah, the way I was
Assuming it's
thinking,
not
Jim
changing.
was the slash, so that would be national slash world.
Fifth grade. Sixth grade.
That's world history.
It is currently world
But
history.
it's a lot of it's cultural stuff, but they do.
None of
case
the
studies,
aid-ons say
religions,
that
and
they're not changing it.
Right, so we could do nation with a little bit of world at the end, where does our nation
Yeah.
fit within the context of the world, and then world history takes over, right? That would be fifth grade.
Yeah.
And then you kind of work your way back, which would be region, from the way I think, region, nation, and then you work your way back, state, region, and you work your way back, community, state. And then you've got the progression.
I think there's so much to teach about the state of Missouri, that if you stick it in one grade level, I mean, if you've ever been in a fourth grade social studies class, it is a lot. Those kids do a ton.
I think it's interpreted as a lot.
Well,
I think it's interpreted as a lot of minutia.
that's why if you did,
Just by looking at the distribution of post-its, I don't know if that has something to do with it.
that's
or-
why if you did community, state, region, nation, it spreads it out and it draws those connections between. It's not just fourth grade, we're only going to state. But we're gonna introduce state as a concept. Then we're gonna develop it more fully and we're gonna transition it.
I like that a lot.
We're talking
I
about,
think you'll have fourth grade teachers protesting on the top of.
Oh, no, I think they will be too, because they're not
No,
used
that's
to
not
it.
the problem. Just-
what are you talking about?
Wouldn't be the first time.
So you're talking about third?
I've been thrown out better places than this.
Hey, I had a guy tell me that during the softball game in summer ball.
And Kathy, is it because they've just taught it for so long?
Yes.
Yes.
So with that
I
being
think
said, if you're
there's
gonna,
a lot of fourth grade Missouri history teaching that you never even look.
so if you're gonna say
Which is a
change, are we not changing it just because they're gonna be upset because we're changing it?
Oh, I didn't say we were changing it.
But I think it's better,
It's just commentary.
no, I'm right there with you, that was one of the first things I said is they're going to flip out. Yes.
Having probably the most senior educator in the room and having taught grades 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. Back in the olden days, it was a fifth grade between. It was fifth grade did at the state, and then they switched to fourth grade. And I know that specifically because I was teaching fifth grade and had been to the Capitol tour so many times. And then I switched to fourth grade and then we started teaching it
I
there.
did the same thing, yeah.
And you adjusted and you survived.
I made it. Yes,
It wasn't
We can
uproar, I
quote
mean,
you
it wasn't
when we-
uproar.
You're grateful that you had a job.
There wasn't uproar about it when we switched it, but
But I think at least with the slack it's
been-
method, if second grade lays the foundation of the state and the basics,
Yeah.
and then build the foundations, then third grade can pick up on that foundation already built, and we've got more connectivity.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
we had more of a.
I know you were saying you don't like to use the word region early, but if you, I mean, I realize, but if you introduce the idea of region, then you say local region, state, and then you move, so then you're starting to move into your national region, or your United States regions, then that word isn't so maybe foreign, or I don't know.
Regions of the state, regions of
Regions
the
of the
country.
state, regions of the country, yeah.
So the word
Maybe that's,
But that phone call, we'll have to make. School.
I get to go.
When I need to step out, if I need to step out and he's, I know Patrick's not back, but I would go please proceed. I mean, I kind of know where you're headed. And I think Elizabeth, about any scenarios. I mean, I should be going real long, no, it's gonna be 5 minutes, and it's going use 15 and 20, I don't know.
Glenn, you want me to take care of your pie for you?
No,
Kathy,
watch my eye.
Either way.
Watch it
So
as
watch
you
your
eat
eye,
it.
you can have it.
I'll bring a piece back for you.
So, someone talk me through, how do we include our world prior to sixth grade? Because that is, I think my hang up on this is, the world piece.
Unless you're gonna go through on a strand and
Well, can I
incorporate
ask-
the global awareness and the citizenship in through everyone. How does yourself belong in the world? How does your school belong in the world? How does your community? That's why I don't know if I'm putting world at the top. I think it's something that has to be integrated throughout. At least that's how I see it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, how can you, how can you not teach our nation's history without talking about the world? I'm just saying, isn't that just,
Yes,
we weren't
it
a
is.
nation
Yes.
before, we've only been around for a couple hundred years. So wouldn't that just be part of how you taught the founding of our nation by introducing the world, at least a portion of the
think that
world?
way. But if that's not articulated
Right.
somehow,
If it's not
I
in a
don't know that
box,
all
some-
people naturally think that way.
Mhm.
Right.
Sometimes it's just a tumult. Well, it says this on this document, so.
Right, if it's not in a box, then
Okay.
that's the struggle.
Yeah.
Because teachers have pressure on every side, and they're just trying to say, I taught this box.
It's elementary, elementary subject too.
Yeah. I came from a city in Germany that was 1,000 years old. And I used that as a timeline when I taught fifth grade.
Thank goodness we only have a couple hundred years.
You know, but that's one of the things, because the fifth graders would always go, well, how did that work? What did it look like? But just the concept of something being in place for 1,000 years. As a matter of fact, the year that I left, 75, was 1,002 years that the city had been in existence, you know. So, from a historical aspect, it's all, can something be that old?
New York's got a similar climate to this, but they have communities around the world.
So I did,
My community compared to other communities in different places.
so on Wednesday, I did a workshop for teachers in the Parkway School District that was around global awareness. And it was not based on a particular grade level, and I work with teachers K-12. And it's not on a grade level, but how do you infuse the understanding of connectedness to the world at different grade levels? And so it's not this category, it's this one across. Because regardless of what you're teaching, there are opportunities to connect to what things are like in other countries and other places in the world. So for me, I don't see that as a major stumbling block, because it just means something we need to pay attention to. That's why we have it up here somewhere, don't we? But we continue to remind ourselves that we're going to get, that's something we want to make sure, and the glees woven through there in a way that's developmentally appropriate.
What's behind you? Where do we include those 2 points?
Right.
Which I think they have to go in one of the 7 standards.
Yeah, I think they're gonna come across here, this way.
But we need to put it in that. Like she said, if it's not in the box,
Right.
then I
It's
don't
gonna have
really
to.
know what is gonna be taught.
We could try to get Patrick in here so we can move forward.
He's on the phone.
And it's like the comments, deal, maybe that would be in a different spot from second grade. You know, so right now it says identify the comments.
Okay, but here's my view for continents. There's the songs of the ocean, the continents. My kid nailed it in second grade. I go around and turn into a 9th grade classroom, world history, label the continents and oceans. It's not
gone
It's not there.
because
So
it's
it was second
developmentally-
grade,
we never
it
had
was
a grade.
ninth grade. When did it get hit on again in here? So he knows the song in second grade, it'll be interesting in 6 years from now, if he still knows where they are. So unless all of this that we're doing is going to connect later on, absolutely.
He'll be your distance.
Do your kids now in second grade struggle with continents and oceans and, okay, there's songs on YouTube and they're real catchy and real goofy and just sing them or just play it for them. But at least they'll know them.
And it goes back
At
to,
least
but
they'll
it
know
goes
them.
back to that level
Well, that's
of
the thing, you gotta know some stuff.
degree of knowledge, right?
Mhm.
Because, yeah, they may be able to recite them, but does it have any relevance to them?
No, but at least they are,
But
they
The
recite and they know
song
the
is
songs are
introduced.
right.
We can
And then when you
introduce
talk
it,
about
right?
China, it's like, oh, that was on this continent, or oh, this ocean is over here, not over there.
Or your teacher says China is on the continent of Asia, and you're like, oh.
Now, I was, on our district writing assessment last spring, second graders had a map of trade routes, early trade routes. And they had a text passage about Columbus. And they had a video that they watched. And they experienced all three of those over a 2-day session. They had to read the text passage independently. And then they had a prompt that spoke to, essentially, how did different goods come to America, and use evidence from at least one or more of those sources to support your answer. And they did pretty well. You know, but the idea was that all of that content was there available for them. It wasn't dependent upon content they had been taught. But what was surprising, I think, to a lot of teachers was that they could do it.
Okay, here's my suggestion at this point. I think we need to do another go around. We've had a lot of discussion. We've had some good thinking on all parts. Let's do another around the group and give us your best thought right now as to what we want to label
Grade 2.
grade 2. And then, or the other option would be, we can vote on this, to go to grade 5 and try to look back and see if grade 2 can do. So let's do an option on which one you'd like to do first. How many people would prefer going to 5 and working backward? How many people want to continue with grade 2? So really, we don't want to do any.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, we're going with 2, and let's see, I started with Aaron last time. So let's go back to Rolf. I don't think I started with you yet.
I like the local part, so, the local / region.
Okay. Patrick,
Pass right now?
sure, come back in your mouth isn't full. We can do that. Great.
I like, local region / state.
Kathy?
Yes, and.
Yes.
Local region / state.
Okay, I am seeing that also. My question is it local region / state, or local / region / state?
Ah.
I'm liking local region / state.
Yes,
that's what
That's
Okay.
local region is fine.
I just want to clarify that.
Tanya, okay with that?
Tony said yes.
I like the parsimony of the community / state.
I like community / state. The problem I have with the region is local region or local regions. And then you only teach about the local region you're in and forget the other regions. I don't know, to me that seems wishy-washy.
Okay, so we have some people who are comfortable with local region / state. You were local Community slash state. Laura's a little iffy on that, so let's take 4 minutes for a general discussion and see where we are then.
What if, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, I mean, you're talking about over the span of the school year, right? So if you expand in the second grade, your local region, and you're moving towards a state, wouldn't you naturally be thinking of the other regions of your state as you're introducing the state? Because you're really not killing the state at that point, you're introducing the idea of the state of Missouri. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yep. That's the way I think of it.
Yeah,
Safety card.
I'm looking at the regions, if that's the case, I kind of know, I would say I'm Southwest region, but somebody that lives in Springfield, say, to me, that's almost, it's getting closer to the border of maybe central and southwest, so what determines the region that you're in, I guess? And do we have names for all the regions already?
I didn't realize.
Geographically, they do, they call them by there's a regional map.
Okay, that's what I was wondering, if it's
In
already
terms of the
laid out
geographic
somewhere,
standards.
and where you're at, okay.
I wasn't realizing that you were literally talking about like the southwest region necessarily. I was just thinking of the region around where your school is, because that's what you would learn about first, right?
And then you work your way up to
Then,
the southwest region, then work your way
then
to
you're broadening it to,
Yeah.
hey, there's other parts to the state, right, as the school
the
year goes on.
Ozarks region or whatever. Yeah.
Okay, the reason I can't wrap my head down, and I'm sorry, you were watching, I'm trying to see both sides. State is normally taught at 4th grade, and we're gonna kick part of it down to 2nd. I don't know if that's too big of a deal, because, and I know these will change, but as I sit here right now and look through what is in place for 3rd grade, I can see state fitting. I look at 2nd, and it still looks like more foundational things to me. I see regions come up, places, maps, keys, titles, local. I just don't know if that's too big of a jump.
I guess the way I look at it is that 3rd grade will become really the year of the state. But we're gonna introduce it by the end of grade 2. And that in the context of transitioning from the idea of being in a community, everything from this is my local community, all the way up to we build up to the idea of a state along those strands. And then the real year of the state becomes year 3. But by the end of that, we start saying, and our state, by the way, is embedded in a region of the country, And then the year 4 becomes the real year of the region of the country. And by the way, those regions are embedded in the country. And so grade 5 becomes really the year of the nation as it currently is. But by the end, we're also thinking about our nation in the context of the broader world, which provides that transition then to grade 6.
We have 1 more minute.
One of the things that you just hit on, and it just hit me again, the way it used to be with 5th grade with regions that we taught, we had an automatic tie-in when we talk about regions. For instance, the region that, in national region of Missouri fits in farming communities, farming province. We tie that into the world because import, export, and we literally tie economics in with that. I don't see that anywhere done.
You mean currently?
Currently.
Yeah, I can't think of it.
I mean,
I can't think of it right now in the current standards, but that could be something that goes across this way.
economics on number 4.
So when you're looking at, going back to the concern that Jack raised. 30 seconds. You would say, okay, we're gonna be looking at whatever we call grade 2, that space that's bigger than our community, but not as big as our state. And we could say, we're producing these things in the county, that area, and they're being shipped someplace in the world, or we're bringing in stuff, or people are coming to this greater area from other
but.
Guys, can I ask if we can just kind of keep, because
Yeah.
I'm still
I don't think
processing.
we're
We're
done.
not done.
Yeah.
Let's take 4 more.
Are we open or taking turns?
It's your turn.
It's up in discussions.
Can I ask a question to those who are teach, just, I mean, you seem to be struggling with putting the state in the third grade, is there,
Not with third, second.
just even introducing it in the second grade?
I worry that if we put it on that white strip at the top, it looks like an equal. And that I think the national progression of teaching is you build and you gradually increase, like, yes, I do single digit numbers, then double digit numbers and subtract, okay, so forth. So if I'm in grade 2 and I'm doing local / region, whatever, I'm building up to that next state level.
So your thought is leave it just at local region?
I don't know, it makes me nervous. Not that they can't do it, if you're telling me it will be a small part of the Post-it notes, I would be okay. But just seeing that as the title, I think, oh, shoot, I mean, that's a lot.
You can actually tie the state part in strand 5 when you're building up from local and region. And then as one of the GLEs in there, reference to the state, like the regions add up to the state. That students recognize different regions make up the state of Missouri. And at that point, in the third grade, you can pick local for state. That's one of the things right there.
And you could go in and study, we would study Southwest region, but with the understanding that there are other regions and maybe know their names, like you said. Understand that there are others, but only study our local region.
Are there 5? Northeast, northwest, central, southwest, southeast?
And then there's another one.
St. Louis
It
County.
depends on what, it depends on what graph you look at.
It matters which one you look at, I know, and
So
it's
then we're gonna
different,
get into that
different
area.
books and different districts, but there's sometimes one that's also determined by the river.
Well, the one that looks like by the river is the Ozarks, the Boot Hill, the Western, the Great region.
Well,
northern.
geographically, it's actually the determination of the Missouri River, that floodplain area, as I recall.
That's this one.
That was that one.
Yeah, that's it.
But aren't you I mean, to me, I'm thinking, are we getting stuck on actual, literally naming the regions as opposed to just the concepts of the local region? However broad a school district wants to make it, wouldn't that be up to them to determine if they wanna have it the entire region that they're in, or if they wanna just, maybe where my school district is, they don't wanna introduce Kansas City. I'm just thinking maybe that, some of it, you do have.
No,
to
yeah, they'll
be-
determine whatever they want, but when we
Yeah.
put it up here for all kids in Missouri to know, do we wanna put it as, and can identify or describe or geographical or whatever the regions of Missouri? Because it would be hard to just put your region.
What
So
about geographic regions?
could we
That's a standard.
do,
It's
just a different idea, what if we did community or communities / regions of the state? We're not saying how many regions they need to teach, we're not saying, how broad they have to make, we're not telling them they're doing the state. We're telling them they're doing regions of the state, which gives you the idea that you're broadening to the point of state for third grade. At the same time, you haven't said second grade, cause I know my second grade teachers, they'll flip their lids when they think they have to start teaching state. So,
you cut that down 2 years.
Honestly, I think right now, state symbols is really more of a second grade level thing that we're doing in fourth grade. For sure. I also think that about famous Missourians. In second grade, when they're able to read, begin to read independently, they can read low text level biographies. I do think it makes sense to move some of those things down, for me, it would be those, what's my identity with the state, those symbols are I see the state flag, I see, those are somewhat, or should be, somewhat familiar. So to me, those kinds of things are what we would tackle, but would I want a second grader trying to discuss issues within the Missouri Compromise? Probably not. You know, so I think there's maybe enough stuff for both places.
Do we want more discussion still?
Yes,
Well,
at least I do, I don't know about anybody else, but I just don't.
in the current lease, we have, on 1D, in kindergarten, we have flag as symbol of our nation. First grade, we have Statue of Liberty, nation's capital. Grade 2, importance of Pledge of Allegiance. And then we talk about explain how the national anthem symbolizes our nation by grade 3. One of the things I remarked about is that we don't, and even in the Missouri one, which wasn't our job to look through that one, but I think that we put the Missouri further out where we can combine those. If we're looking at important symbols, we can look at symbols for our nation and our state. We can move that forward, I think. So I would agree with what you're saying, Kathy, that it shouldn't just be left for 4th grade. Sorry, I stepped on.
Oh,
You still chewing?
I'm just having, I'm struggling to see how just regions of the state are gonna fit, one, a full year of curriculum, and 2, all 7 of those pieces. Knowing that I live in the southwest part of the state, even though I probably don't, but just, okay, so I know that. What am I doing the rest of the year?
What are the characteristics of this region?
And how do we wanna work things in? I mean, what parts of principles of the republic are we working into that?
if, for an example, if we're talking about a region being, in some situations, a county. Maybe we talk about county governance structure, the documents that, for the establishment of the county. We're talking about the history, we're talking about the history of that county, who settled there, why did they settle there? Where did they
Is it
come
gonna be
from?
different than what we just did in the community?
That's the point, is that, yeah, the community is smaller, and now we're doing something bigger than the community, but less than the state. And that's why I lean towards the slash, because it's in between.
I was kind of playing with more than a slash, so maybe as a descriptor. So I'm part of a family and school. My school is part of a community. My community is part of a region in our state. Our state is part of our nation. Our nation's beginnings, and then up to, if we split that big hunk of US history between where we are working more deeply with documents, not just principles in the documents, but working within the actual documents, if we could divide that up a little bit instead of leaving our nation to 5th grade, or I was kind of playing with that idea.
Then why not divide state between 3rd and 4th?
Well, I
If you're
think-
how to bridge it.
I think you, in my thinking, that's probably what we're gonna do.
It's like you can't see second.
Yeah, it's a grade 3 state.
No, that's.
Stressing me out.
Well, and that's what I
Our
was, when I
state.
said our state is part of the nation, but how did that happen?
Because,
What was the
Is
Missouri
that-
Compromise? What, how did that?
but even before that, if you start going back, you start getting into explorers. And so you're taking, you can relieve some of 5th grade, because now you start thinking about how did Missouri get there? And then you start talking about, well, there was French explorers, and then you get into the French, and that leads to the French and the English, and then you start to get, because one of the first things you do is you start to talk, in 5th grade, we go through explorers. And part of them is the French explorers, but what most kids never, what you never have time for is to explain how the French and Indian War actually had an impact on the Revolutionary War. You can't get as much into some of those pieces because you don't have the time. But to understand what the French and Indian War, so that, what I'm saying is, you can start talking about how some of the French explorers came, which means that as you start to get to the nation's history, you can really start to focus on the 13 colonies and not have to go back as much into some of the other explorers and can really maybe focus more on the nation, but yeah, you may be able to move and put some of those pieces together. I really like I like the headings there, I really like those too.
Can you do it one more time, please? You don't have to start from the beginning, just from the beginning of second grade.
And my community is part of a region in our state, so that you're getting that idea, we're starting back at community, but community is part of this local region, and region is part of a state.
And when I hear that, I don't hear them doing the state of Missouri's history. I hear what we're trying to get at.
And then, like, so third grade is, you know, our state is part of the nation, but we are learning that those really important parts of our state in third grade.
Would you like to make a motion?
I still like discussion.
Can you go to fourth grade?
Well, I left off, because I think then the problem, one of the things that's always frustrated me as a teacher and then as a curriculum facilitator is the lack of chronological order. And so, the hard thing about doing that state stuff and then doing the rest of US history is that it jumps back and forth, and I do think that's hard for kids.
And it's confusing.
And I think that's hard for teachers. So that part of it doesn't settle with me in this plan, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because then, you know, so I thought, well, if I do our state as part of the nation, then we still need to do US history beyond well, it would depend on, I guess, how we laid out US, Missouri, and world history all along. But Alden, you'd have to connect that for me.
Well, the thing again too is in grade 4, I think it needs to be stressed, the regions of the country. That still needs to be in there because there's a disconnect. You can take the state, but all of a sudden you throw that state in the middle, and we're literally in the middle of the United States. One of the concepts that students had trouble with is how did the little states on the East Coast, why are they little on the East Coast, but as you transport yourself across to the West, you've got these huge chunks of land. And most kids cannot tell you why that is. I have grown-ups that can tell you why that is. Because there's a disconnect with this state. Why is the state of Missouri bigger than the state of New York by population? So, I mean, you can tie all kinds of things in. I like the local region part and then into the state. And third grade could do the state, quite a bit of it, but then tie the state in with grade 4 with the regions. So when you get into 5th grade, you have that whole connection going down.
Or you could do, so third, our community is part of a region in our state. Second, third, our state is part of a region in our nation. Fourth, our nation.
Right.
Fifth, our nation is part of a region in our world.
Yeah.
Because we're part of this continent.
It would all work. Yeah, that's the other thing. The connection of how many continents how many countries are on the North American continent? And the United States is it? No.
So when you were talking first, the reason I asked for a little more discussion was that 4th grade year, which is that transition that Ralph spoke to, which is the state. If we move the state, the real study of state along all of these strands to third, and we're going to end up nation with maybe some world at the end to transition to world in the 6th. Then what does grade 4 become? Does it become a split of the nation, or does it become what Ralph said, which was understanding our regions like the Midwest, Southwest, etc. And I prefer that because I find it at the disconnect.
You prefer which one?
A regional focus of the nation to build towards in that understanding. Because then historical context of the gateway to the west. We talk about it in the context of the state history, but what about the whole region? What's happening in the region? What happened to why was St. Louis such a booming town and suddenly not? Because of Chicago. And what happens in Chicago? Right? What's happening with the expansion of the Midwest? And why is suddenly all these presidents coming out of Ohio in the Midwest? And those sorts of things. It always helps to build that connectedness of understanding the state and not just making a big jump from the state to the nation. So we haven't made any decisions
No,
on it. You didn't miss anything but discussion, lots of discussion.
All right, we're gonna go around and do a poll again. And just right now, what is your, unless you need more discussion,
Are we just doing the poll on second grade?
we can do a poll on whatever you wish to say, it's just a poll on your
What do you
current
guys
thinking.
think? Okay. I'm good with community and local. And or.
Patrick?
I'm still struggling with it, to be honest with you. Just because I still am having a hard time, like, I'd like to see more on how we're going to be able to pull all this in. I do like it more with Kathy's kind of expertise, I just wonder if we're not focusing a lot on geography. But maybe not some of the other pieces quite as much, and I'm wondering how we're gonna get a full picture. I'm also concerned that what we're really doing is just moving everything down here. And that all we're really doing is taking everything and just sliding it to the left and bringing world into 5th grade, and putting nation in 4th grade, state into 3rd grade, and everything's just being slid down. Which is what it kind of is, what it's starting to kind of sound like. I know that's why I think grade 4 and grade 2 right now are the ones that seem to be kind of the most up. And part of that I'm having an issue with is I get the regions, I get that people may not get that right now, but I also don't feel like that's a rich years-long worth of curriculum to know where New England is and where the West is, if that's what we're trying to talk about, versus knowing your border states in Missouri. And so once they can identify the 8 border states of Missouri, are they done? And I don't know what it's next comes back to, how do we get a year's worth of social studies curriculum that's rich and rigorous and worthwhile to the kids out of knowing the regions of your state and out of knowing the regions of our country.
I'm similar to Patrick in that it's hard for me to connect to put a label on something that I'm not sure what I'm labeling at. So that,
Tell me again what your label would have been to that if we were using your phrases.
well, and I don't know that I was committed to it, I just,
No, just as an
a different kind of a way of thinking about it. I'm part of my family in school. My school is part of a community. My community is part of a region in our state. Our state is part of a region in our nation. Our nation is part of a region in the world.
Aaron?
I really like the way this is said, and I mean, it's basically the same thing, she's doing the same thing, it's just reading it more, I would say teacher-friendly way, so that they know more of what they're looking at, rather than, like she said earlier, if you put state on second grade, it's gonna be just oh my gosh. But the way she has it written here, it makes more sense as a teacher's standpoint, yeah.
Tony?
I think, we're spending too much time doing that, because I don't think this is something we're gonna do and never revisit again. I think we did this to set up as kind of a guide for us to be able to place things in certain grades And then if we start doing it, that may influence us changing the top label. I think we need to put something down and be ready to move to the next step.
Kind of in the same, I'm looking at, to me, I look at what are our 7 areas, and by the time they end the 5th grade, the way I work is, what do I want them to know at the end of the 5th grade, and then that's how I work back in many ways, and I'm kind of like you, I think we're getting hung up on exactly, it sounds almost more geographical, like Patrick was saying, as opposed to, we've got all these.
What comes under that, it really is.
Yeah, I mean, so.
I tend to agree with Tony and Tanya about this, is that we might be getting caught up a little bit on semantics, because it doesn't sound like we're really arguing over content, over focus. We're just, how are we gonna label it, and I'm hearing people voice fears that teachers will interpret it in certain ways, which, might be something we should wordsmith later.
Here's gonna be my suggestion on this, is that we use a green sticky and ask Laura to please write these things down and see if I'm not capturing them all, just as our thoughts on this as we're moving along, and then we go on to the next one, and then come back. Would everybody be comfortable with that?
Yeah.
These are the things I have written that were our general thinking on that, and I may have missed something. Community and local was one. I am a part of a region in our state. I am a part of a region in our state. Okay, you're clear. And regional community / state. Did I miss anything else that was brought up that we were?
Can I ask you to run through, because I'm still, what did, on your listing, Kathy, what was 4th grade? Our nation?
Okay, and can you just stick that up there at the top of 2, so that we add those when we come back to it, once we progress on. And Craig, could you come and read, please, briefly?
As he's coming around, I'm just spend a little bit of what I saying, well, go body night, did other things besides throw chairs. And one thing that he did was show the whole picture, break it down to details, show the whole picture again, break it down to details, show the whole picture, break it apart. He constantly did that. I think this process, we can't, I don't think we're gonna get that set. and leave it. So,
I agree, let's bring him back and switch.
and check kids, yeah.
Rob felt like.
That's not distinguishing character.
I think you're all fine, buddy. I think everyone.
Very good.
In 3rd grade, instead of having 4th grade be our nation, we get it our state. And then our state is a part of the region of the nation, and then 4th, 5th grade can still be, our nation's a part of it.
I think the region is what's killing us.
I do, I think.
I think region doesn't even need to be a vocabulary on the table, and I don't think it's being geographical, I think it's perspective.
Yeah.
The kindergartner's perspective of the principal's republic from self-family school. The 1st grader's perspective of school family from the republic. You're just starting small and building big. Doesn't have to be geography, just has to be, we want their brains to grow and learn more information, and we want to keep it connected. Sorry. That's what we lost focus on. Then when region came in, it just blew my mind, because I'm like, oh my gosh, your region's different than mine, and then teachers making assessments, and it could just be a nightmare.
Yeah, it's expanding correctly.
Before Craig finishes
Sorry.
reading 3rd, would you prefer, as a group, going to 5th and working back from there? Just a thought.
I have no opinion on that, somebody feels some way about it.
I think we started going this way, so to stop and go to the end and then try to come back, it seems confusing. Is this just me again? I would think I feel like we're moving it.
Feel like going the way we're going.
If I remember correctly, we're pretty much in consensus on grade 3.
Yes,
What
we
did we all
have
say?
states,
Yeah, that's
state
like-
/ region, county / lake, historical time frame.
What was that one before that? County?
County / state.
Okay.
So
So we
state,
have-
region, state, county, 4 of them are state, and then historical time.
All right, so we're gonna do a talk around, and this time we're starting with Tony.
county group would, there's a lot to learn there, states, and I think, I don't really understand the evidence compared to the grade level expectations that was underneath it, but I do think the historical, what was it called?
Historical timeframe?
Yeah, but is that gonna be anyway though?
No, it's not right now.
Okay.
There.
Oh, I'll just say that and I'll listen, but I really believe county and state. Mhm.
Trying to hear, I don't know about.
So I'm gonna change the way I talk about this. The primary focus of grade 3 is state, but it should probably start a little bit connected to the previous and end with the next. But the primary focus, I would say, for grade 3 should be state.
Yes, and I would only make it two things. I want to pick up wherever second grade left off, was the primary focus being state. But I think natural progression of teaching is going to lead you through state to the bigger picture next. And I worry with putting 3 things up there, there's too many perspectives and lenses to look through, and then we're all gonna get bogged down.
So as far as,
You're gonna do /state.
Something / state. What am I, we decide?
I agree with that. I would actually probably get rid of all the slashes and just have state. As we move to 4th grade, I would like to see our state as a part of the nation, kind of like what Kathy said. And I think that leads to being able to address taking some of the things off of what 5th grade's trying to do. And because we have said 5th grade was so heavy, that's what I think we started to do is put state in 3rd grade, and that moves some more things down to 3rd grade, and that allows 4th grade to pick up some of what 5th grade had in the past too.
So if we're thinking about cognitive and a continuum of learning, then we have to think through this, and this is a continuum of how kids are just expanding their thinking on those 7 strands. And so I think if you're just thinking through that, I think just state would be fine. We're thinking grade 3 is really using a state perspective and a lens to influence our cognition on all of those 7.
I can see that, and I think you could create the connections from before and where they're going within the week.
Yeah.
I'm kind of, what Tony was talking about earlier, I think, yes, we just write the word state up there because we're gonna revisit it. And it may change to something more like what she has. And
As we move along.
as we move on, because once we move everything where we want it in grade 3, we may think, oh, that's all state, but maybe we wanna use a different heading.
Discussion. I'm hearing the predominance of people saying state. We still have a state
Yes,
slash.
because they kind of, Tony passed, if you have anything.
Oh, that's right, thank you.
I like the idea of really be calling it state.
Most people are saying state, but we had a couple of outliers there, so there are the points to make.
I submit, we'll do state, and then we see what builds from that as we do this. Because we're gonna be caught with some standards here that other places go, we might stick with their change the heading.
Those are proposed.
Yes.
I second.
All those in favor, state? State it is. Greg? 4th grade, Mr. Mustard.
Fourth grade. Region, regional, region, nation, state, region, historical time frame.
Well, we'll stay out.
Okay.
Or if it's slash.
Wait a minute.
Well, is it by
Well,
itself?
no, state building to the region, state is part of the region.
Gotcha. I just wanted to put myself.
First grade,
It's
first grade.
Would you read that one more time, please?
Region or regional, region nation, region state, and historical concept.
Okay. We'll do a talk around, and let's see, Kathy, I don't think I've started with you, so why don't you start this time?
Pass.
Okay,
Well, I just want to listen to thinking.
we can come back, but Patrick, keep me honest if I forget. Okay,
I got my own.
Aaron?
I think the regional, like he was saying, we've talked about the state, and then we need to talk about how it fits in the region of the United States, leading to the United States later on.
Region slash nation,
Region slash nation.
just for discussion.
Just throwing it out.
I don't know. There's a lot too, I understand there's a lot on region, but you're gonna get pretty,
Kind of regions of the nation.
yeah, is it our region or?
Mhm.
Or
Of
is
the
it-
nation,
okay,
it's.
okay. But I still think that, I might be wrong, but I think that's kind of a new perspective or a new way of looking at history that isn't commonly practiced by teachers. They really talk that much about that.
May I comment?
Yes.
We do here and there, for instance, when we teach Native Americans,
Mhm.
we would teach about the southwestern Native Americans.
About region and culture,
But that goes that way.
got you, okay, all right,
So how would you label it again?
just region.
Oh, I didn't know if it was you, sorry.
No, it's just.
Yeah, I was addressing the thing, I don't know how much content there is there without getting kind of, no, I said, I don't think that our teachers are usually teaching regional history. Or maybe we need to be.
Because they get really caught up in Missouri history.
Yeah.
Tanya?
I'm not sure. I have anything to add with that.
I'm gonna start going with a single title, even though I was a slasher. And please quote that. Go with region, but now I'm coming to every one of these different perspectives, that when we work the glees, we're gonna do scaffolding within the glees. But for the sake of simplicity, I'm gonna say region, or national region, in case someone's worried about
Region or regions?
regions.
National region.
National regions.
In case someone might confuse it with state regions.
So I look at it like this, self is a small part of the family. You're not, and you're going to, by teaching family, you're teaching self, the micro part of it, which is the bigger picture. By teaching nation, you're going to teach regions. It's gonna come in when you
But
go
you
across.
don't.
But it can go in when you come across this way. My concern is if you stick them both at the top, then you're gonna address, and those things at the top are just to help keep us focused. I
Right,
was
right.
assuming, it's not like they can go anywhere.
Right.
So if we wanna think region and nation grade, I think we all have the same understanding of nation. I think region, like you said, if you don't get specific, you're going to miss it.
That's like.
You're gonna get stuck on state, you're gonna get stuck, well, even if you define region, you're gonna get stuck on, it's just
The region we're in is.
right, or just the region of Missouri,
So
or the
regions.
Southwest, or the, right, and then if, I just Googled it, I just Googled regions of Missouri, and there's like 20 different regional maps, so define region, are we really gonna micromanage that much? I like nation, so I'm done.
You like what?
Nation,
On four.
national, nation, whatever we do.
I think I like the idea of adding national regions. So just region for national regions.
I'm kind of playing around with a historical time frame.
Give me some, I'm thinking the same thing right here.
Not me posting now.
I know it's kind of way up there.
Kathy, are you going, yes?
No, because now I might have all the sway thinking the other way, I'm just like, this way.
And I think and the reason why I'm thinking that way is I think there's a nice natural break right here before we get into the nation. I have a very hard time putting the nation on the fourth grade, because I really feel like we're just taking everything and sliding it left. And I feel like once we put, what that does to fifth grade is it does, and we start to get in the world, which is exactly what they're going to be doing in sixth grade. So what does that mean for sixth grade? And we're not even on the sixth grade committee. So I do have a hard time with that. I mean, but I'm also thinking, I also feel like fifth grade covers so much history. Is there not some way where we start to go back and look at it from a historical perspective of breaking that up? Like what happened before the American Revolution or the Constitution, finding a spot before that, before there even was technically an America, before it even became the colonies, and looking at that as a historical time frame here, and then a historical time frame for our nation, and whether it's taking Missouri and how Missouri fits into the like history of just a bigger time frame. So I give you, again, this is very, very, I really thought it out very well. But so we just learned about the state, and some of that may be the history of the state. But then as we start to go into regions of the nation, some of that might be, what I can start to see in there is, how did states actually get formed in this region? Which leads me to all the way back to some of the explorers and some of those other pieces. And so maybe we start a historical time frame for fourth and fifth grade just to break up that great big picture of American history and break it into two pieces here in fourth and fifth grade. One that starts earlier and then one that starts, and it gets us in fifth grade. And I think there's so many, because the other thing I kept hearing, like, when you guys brought in, what about Native Americans? What about Native Americans? Where have they fit in any of this? And maybe there's some in the history of community and some of that and some of those other pieces. But I feel like we've lost, like, I still can come back, 6 is gonna be tough and something, we're gonna really, not that we can't, but that's just kind of, maybe it's not very well thought out.
Greg?
My thinking was grade 4, and this may not be the right tag, but I was thinking the building of the nation. And then maybe grade 5 being just nation. And so you look at thinking in historical context, you start building the nation, and where does, and then you finish off with where you are in context. I know you're only getting to Civil War, but I think you start building world history, the building of a nation. So grade 4 and 5 both add a little bit of piece to world history, to where in 6th grade you pick up the world history and you prepped yourself.
Yeah, because we're picking up the French who came in and English and
All right.
Both of them give you, I think, sorry.
I was trying to make sure I was understanding. Okay, Kathy, we need to come back to you and come back to Tanya.
I think that's interesting, but what happens, where do we talk about before the birth of our nation? So where would we talk about Native American regions, where would we talk about early world exploration? Where would those things go?
In my limited Kentucky aspect, all of that is included in the birthing of our nation. What did they find here? Who came over? What were the things leading up to that piece? But I'm pretty limited.
And that means somebody's gonna submit a PO to me buying books.
You should
I'm gonna
say
say,
no.
Just don't know.
resources online. They love books down there.
Well,
No one
I mean,
knows.
I'm sorry.
I like the idea of somehow breaking up our nation, if there's just way too much to try to cram into a grade. And either of those options, very good, I think, yes, how, what was this country, or what was this area of the world like before it was the United States, and how did it become the United States, and then, I like the idea of that.
Here's what I have, is I have 3 things written down, and then we'll do an open discussion. I have national regions was one, historical time frame, and building of a nation, which again, I think fits into that historical time frame, but it's kind of divided into the 2. Okay, we have 10 minutes of discussion.
Real quick, I'm sorry, I think with Tony, I mean, what we're talking about, a lot of those resources you may already have because your 5th grade teachers have been teaching it.
Yeah.
Now they'd have to figure out how to share, because it's usually all in one great big book.
I'm just.
Right, so I was like, when you said, I was thinking the same thing, I was like, oh, what are we, we haven't really started thinking about that, but I was thinking, as long as we haven't, and that would be another piece, as we start looking about world history. If we start doing world history in 5th grade, none of the 5th grades currently are going to have any materials to teach world history. So that would be I can see that being pretty interesting, but.
Are we thinking about world history?
No,
Or just?
No, that's what I'm just thinking, if we started, if we did nation, what's that going to lead to? But I would say it's like similar to those that where before we would do, if I would be like up until, I have to figure out what that line would be as a 1776. What is it that we're looking for, almost the time frames? But, so.
I'm thinking of, I have 2 10-year-olds at home, that one's in 4th grade, one's in 5th grade, one just got out of 4th, so I'm thinking as a 4th grader, how they can learn a lot of that, but how much of it are they going to understand, I guess, my kids, we travel all over the world, but, or all over the country, I guess, and they would understand kind of the concept of the different regions or whatever, but the foster girl that we have has never been out of the state, probably never out of the county. So I'm struggling with that, I guess, not being able to, how much are you gonna be able to move that 5th grade stuff down and have them be able to relate to, I don't know. Are they gonna get it, I guess? It depends on how you teach it, but.
I think that's where the devils get down to the details.
Yeah.
Because if we've got, I'm gonna go idealistic. So I'm gonna assume that every kid's learned everything up through the state. So then they at least know where they are and know what the state is. So part of what you can start with is the geography of where your state's located in the world. And then you can start to think about how do people actually end up in this state where we are? How did we end up here? And then you start back, in 5th grade, I know that you start back at the land bridge. So you start back with people migrating out of Asia over a land bridge into Canada and slowly moving all the way down. And then you start to get into European explorers, so that's where you could, I would say, so if you could even start with that geography of where are we, and start to talk globally, where are we in relation to some of these other places? How did people start coming here? And getting that discussion there. And I think that, can then lend to some of the other pieces, but that's just, I just know that's what we, in the past, has been all 5th grade, we started with land bridge to reconstruction.
From my perspective, I fear we're conflating content with categories, and perspective. That at this level, and maybe that's what we want to do, that's what they do at 6th grade. Right? Because 6th grade, they say, forget about where the child is, now we're just going to talk about content. Up until this point, we've been talking about progressing the child through a developmental stage of an expanding horizons of what relates to them. At this point, what I hear is now we're conflating in that content, and in particular, historical content, which is 1/6 of social studies. So from my concern with taking that approach is that we've lost the rationale for why we're categorizing this in a developmentally appropriate manner to build out the child's experience. And to go in that other direction is to say, okay, we don't have to worry about developmental appropriateness anymore now that they've reached 4th grade. Now we're going to focus more on content.
Those are my thoughts, because the first like 4 weeks of ninth grade social studies, world history, it is, did Columbus discover America? Was it the Vikings? Was it the Native Americans? What does discovery really mean? Geography, I mean, everything we're talking about, they spend like 6 weeks on their beginning of freshman year, and that's just content, and some of them don't even know it. And so my son's in third, and I'm thinking, as a fourth grader, is he gonna be ready for that? I still think there needs to be more foundation, and that was my concern.
Maybe so, but also, every teacher, math teacher says that they don't know multiplication tables. Third grade said I taught them, fourth grade says I taught them, fifth grade says I taught them. If they're in the 12th grade, they still don't know.
Well, somebody didn't do it, but the funny thing about my job is, I had these kids in second, third, and fourth, now I'm in high school, and I have them now back to 11th and 12th. So I know they got it, because I was in there.
Right.
So wherever their disconnect was, and then I look at this and go, oh, disconnect, it wasn't in here for 4 years. That's why you don't know. So maybe they memorized it, or the foundation was there, but if it wasn't reinforced and built upon, I'll forget that stuff.
That brings me,
Okay.
real quick, I'm sorry, but what I would wanna look at is, I think part of it, if we're talking about historical content, I do think part of knowing who you are and where you are is the history of whatever it is. So when we start to get into nation, what I would look at is not that we're getting away from it, but that we're taking that one big piece and breaking it into 2 years. So instead of doing it all in just fifth grade, because really what we state, we've added in region, but my concern with region is that we feel like it's just a kind of an in-between, it's kind of in limbo between state and nation. Whereas I think if we look at, just go from state to nation, but then break nation up into 2 years, it gives us more time to build some of that because it is so big and because it is so difficult, it gives you more time to do it. So I think what was looking at was taking nation, and instead of doing it all in 1 year, doing it in 2 years.
Yeah, that's like what you're saying, and for me, the problematic part of that is then you're not really teaching a scaffolding approach. What you're doing in some ways, I mean, it matters what the glees actually look like, right? But it's basically saying, okay, instead of having this 1 year of content, we're gonna split it across 2 years. Whereas if you gave it the framework of, we're gonna look at that same content within the context of regions of the world, that means we're not stuck in the we're not stuck in the original colonies forever. But instead we're saying, okay, what was happening in New England? What was happening right here in Missouri at that very same time? Actually before that. And what was happening out in the Southwest? And what was happening up in the Northwest at the same time? Because when the Pilgrims landed in Massachusetts Bay, there were actually already Europeans in the United States, and very few people know that part.
Yeah.
Right, and they had actually been here in Jamestown for a long time before Plymouth started. And part of the reason of that is because of the dominance of teaching that original story. If we were to take my hope would be is if we were to take a regional approach, we wouldn't be caught by that, but we could break up that national history in a way that we could talk about what was happening in different regions of the country, in history, in geography.
Without this college national.
Yeah.
I just have a question. You know, typically, I think what we typically do is when we teach history, we start from the beginning and move up. But everything that we've done so far has been in terms of government, in terms of economy and everything, it's been in terms of where the kids are today. So might there be a reason to go on and do state, then nation as it is today, and then look how we got there? Just something fun. Because history is more abstract, that deep history is a little bit more abstract to kids than things that they know.
The way it currently is, maybe national government third, then state government, and then you do history of it. I mean, that's what it is.
That's what it is right now.
So somebody else thought that might be.
One of the things going back through the GLEs, I mean, you don't hit the Native American issue until 5th grade.
I got TPs in my house.
Yeah, you learn, but that's just a
I
scratch.
built one and I've been there.
That's just a scratch, you know, and
But
that's,
there's no connectivity.
there's no
But-
connectivity whatsoever.
But teachers in second grade hang on that one lead
Yeah.
for a long time, because it's the richest content they have
It's
to work with.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It-
So if we can give them some more, they don't have to hang on that, and we can spread it out this way. You know, if you're gonna make national or whatever we call it in 4 and 5, you could put the land bridge into grade 4. Fourth graders will understand that in the progression of the migration. And you can put in there the nomadic tribes changing into agriculture. I mean, you got the Hopi, you got the Zuni, you got all these Indian tribes in the Southwest and all that settled it, you know, and then progressively come across. And then you can tie it in with, who did the Europeans find when they got here? Why did the Indians get the name Indians? Because they thought they were in what? India. And when you tell students that, they go like, is that what it is? I mean, literally. You know, so the connection right there, if you can get all that in. And then you can get into, and this would be basically getting into the colonies and then focusing on the colonies and then the westward expansion all the way to the Civil War. So.
We've got 3 more minutes in open discussion time.
We need a break.
What do you think? You want it is 1:25. Our plan was to leave at
Yeah.
2-ish. Would you like a quick break now? I mean, I'm perfectly open to that, maybe 5 minutes, maybe just a 5 and then
Yeah,
come back.
get oxygen going through our brains.
What's after lunch? Okay.
I'm tired.
My 4 hours of sleep is
Because you have to drive.
So then I left the university and got ready to call my husband and realized I didn't have a phone. So then I had to drive back, find the security card, knocking on windows to open the door, and like, because then I knew I was gonna be driving and I didn't want to not have a phone all day today, or I didn't want to be traveling. So that added on an extra 4 hours. So then by the time I got home,
What do you teach?
You have paid.
social studies.
Or you guys keeping?
So you go home for personal reason or just
No, I
business
teach
stuff?
I teach a course on Thursday nights.
Oh, you went home to teach?
And it's a 3 semester hour course, but it's in 8 weeks, and so the
Yeah.
next one is a lot, you know, so I
How
don't
much
feel
you
like,
get for that?
I don't feel like it's fair to not, to tell them your attendance was part of your grade and then for me not to be there. I don't, you know.
So you get, what, you get about $1,500 for that? something like
For
that.
3 semester hours.
For 8 weeks? That's pretty good. My wife teaches at, well, she teaches from Missouri State and private college, which private college pays $500 credit hour. And Missouri State. Missouri State is closer to that. I think hers is 18 for 3. She prefers to work for them, just not her money. Are you teaching?
And then I didn't have, and I made a campus there, so. It's right next to our central.
That's it. Right.
So no turkeys, huh? Oh, well, we do have some, but it's not enough. I think that's so. So we have trailers, shotgun seasons, or, you know, culture.
Because it's lack of money.
So, and, I mean, you go, yeah, deer.
It's true. And the other thing is, I mean, what, if you go to district.
You live, probably live, you got rolling hills, and you got some woods, you farm the bottoms, and pastures on the hills, that kind of thing where you live, yeah.
I mean, I think that.
Yeah, pretty much. Probably much around the Green City, Kirksville, content of that place. I still go up there, there's turkey everywhere there. My use is there. I still go there. I still go there.
fifth grade.
Well, that's all.
There's no assessment.
And
So
we have,
One of the coolest things to do
the
is to
start
work into
always
country
is like
checks.
because of the test.
And have them scattered everywhere, whatever direction it's in. It's just so neat. So they will, they'll scatter and we'll talk about that.
Awesome freedom.
I guess in case, yes, that's like a year old. And I'll even care if I shoot or not, it's just I need experience. Yeah, great city, miles, to that area, you know, Trenton's not far.
I mean, that's what it is.
That's just closer to you, Trenton,
I'm sorry. I'm a neighborhood.
Your neighborhood.
Okay, well, you said I picked you down. Yeah, it's, I think you south, but south, and I've been there, right? The places, Oklahoma flag there. And there's a place where we set the water, we take down these rocks. Drop it all down like a big waterfall, but it's kind of, there's more water there. Old State River, right? Yeah.
Which is fine, I would say this, but you can even do
Every single concept.
I would have never remembered the name of it. But I knew he said it.
Yeah, they need to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just so upset. Okay, we're gonna answer like, can you-
Yeah.
And we're not gonna get everything. We're not gonna get everything.
I remember, Blue Mayor went out there. I remember the last time I thought I was in trouble, so that friend died, and he didn't want, he wanted the next flag. We went out there and he was told. There was got down and got rid of it. I don't remember who the park ranger or state trooper.
I stuck at that hole yesterday.
And I was getting ready to graduate.
Be easier, it's better to do a draft.
I'm never like that, you know. What is it?
Just,
So it's
something you didn't have.
a different theory.
I have a,
That's the just
mark
I
it.
have to see it model, which shows the game, but how they work, and then research how they always comes into play.
Yeah. I know, you know, honestly, what I've been doing, for the last 3 or 4 years, is people want books, I go, what do you got? And I would use books, I'm not buying any sets of books.
Take those short, chapter novels and find a book set so that they can do their reading lesson through the historical fiction books. I saw there's like 8 or 9 of them. My son and I are right now on the Nazi invasion. And it is the coolest thing ever spent on 9/11. You can teach all this through a chapter book, which you can get for $4 a piece.
How about the Russian race of buildings? You know? And O'Reilly's novel right now.
I think that's the message we're gonna have to get out of that. This is now.
No, I mean.
I know, and I'm
those
giving you
types of
younger
books.
kids,
You
yeah.
start by history written in the novel.
You, but I talked too about historical.
See,
There's
that's
a
one
lot
of
of
the
that
things.
happens in the book.
When I started
But then here are the two kids. So like another plastic containers. And the last.
All right,
historical books.
This
So
all, all very great, all very great.
Oh my
He
God.
tells the story from his perspective.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday.
And you're that.
Well, I asked my principal, what does she want me to do?
All very detailed.
I mean, I could go up and change the man.
Well, I just wondered if they would allow you to, they would allow you to, schedule.
That's kind of what I was.
Right, because that's what I would say.
You found her like that.
Laura, the,
Let's see, here's
you
one.
remember JJ?
Let me just show you something.
Because here's
It's not an original.
I don't know.
Because, just
Think
like,
about it.
you know,
They want you to think.
I really hate to give this away. I need to be there.
Right.
Okay, folks, I was reading for the facilitator, we're gonna get anything done, we're gonna get rolling.
I just said there's.
We better have
Get rolling.
our takeaways
So,
clarified here.
Go ahead.
Alden, you wrote that up, you wanna share what you have there?
Yeah, so it's a really horrible drawing, sorry, I'm just trying to put something together, but, so this is the way I'm thinking. And this is what I see playing out here. As we start with the child, and there are concentric rings of perception that the child will be able to relate to as they grow in development, in age and experience. And what we started with was the self, the community, like just during the term locality, the state, the region, and this is where we're debating regions and nation. And across those, that's their perception level that they will be examining and interacting with content that spans across those. So that's how I'm seeing things. So when we start talking about this, if we get trapped in one of these strands and we decide to replace one of these concentric circles with one of those strands, then it becomes problematic for me in terms of a developmental approach for the child to interact with the different content. So this is kind of the model I have in my head that we started with, that I think right now we're starting to say, what I was hearing was that we're starting to drop this expanding horizons model, is what it's called, and start to now look at it more like secondary does, which says, okay, we get this grade now, it's gonna be, National History Light, right? Or something like that, where it's thematic, like they have in 6th grade world history. So that's all it is.
I would think it would be an interesting thing to play with inquiry being a hat that the person wears. That we go, well, I don't mean literally, I just mean, but that we go about, these things and these things through the tools of inquiry.
Right,
You
well,
wanna have them, is that what you're thinking?
so when I was thinking inquiry, there are some things that are developmentally appropriate to ask a child to do, processes and ways that they're gonna explore the content at the self level. And then at the community level, when I say community level, that means their perception has expanded beyond themselves. And then we know, and that just continues to grow. That toolbox continues to grow as they grow in developmental ability. And at the same time, they can apply those tools to the content at that expanding level as well.
I think where I'm still struggling is with region. Because I have a hard time still seeing regions.
Arguing against that.
No, and I think that's just where with the circle of regions, because I do feel like it's hard, even for me personally, it's hard for me to view myself as a Midwestern.
Yeah, see, you weren't educated that way.
Right, but we also don't have, well, maybe that could be part of it, but we also don't have Midwestern government systems. We also don't have Midwestern pieces that fit that way. Now, there could be historical perspectives of it, but I have a hard time, like, I feel like that's where I'm struggling with it, is because I feel like we have all of those pieces for everywhere except for when we get to regions. And then I struggle with it, seeing yourself as a person of a region, I feel like it's harder. I feel like, that's, to me, is where we make that leap from state to nation. And I think that's why I'm having a hard time. Personally, that's why I'm having a hard time with fourth grade, because it could just be my own personal bias and my own personal background. It's causing me to look at it that way. But that's the part that I'm struggling with, is it's hard for me to see it as a region, other than the historical side of how did people come to the Midwestern region.
So I wonder if we move to nation, but in how we frame the grade level expectations underneath it, we look at the regional aspects of the nation. So we are really, because there isn't a regional government. You're exactly right. Governance systems, historically, we can track back and see that there were some territories there. I mean, we can look historically back at some regional pieces. Virginia used to be West Virginia and Kentucky. I mean, there are pieces there were big regions broken down, but there's really not regional governance systems.
Well, there are.
Outside the courts.
There are the court district courts. There are also
Regulatory bodies, but.
regulatory bodies. That's what I lean towards. There's also economic regional associations. There are environmental regional associations. I know in St. Louis area, one of the things that they're trying to push to is to stop thinking only about we're in Missouri, because what happens in Illinois really has a big impact on what happens in Missouri and along that whole area. So there are some, now there isn't other than the court system, I can't think of formal government instructions, but there are governance, there are regulations and associations that are about the regions. You have water issues out in Southwest, and so there are all kinds of government restrictions that are built just for that region. But it's a new way of looking at it. I understand. It's a new way of looking at it. But what it does is it allows you to start expanding the perception and the relevance of things for children in a new way. I mean, and this is my last aside. I feel like I'm probably talking too much. But it astounds me how little the rest of the country knows about what was going on in this region at the same time as what was happening on the East Coast.
And I would say, I think that was kind of, even as I was initially thinking, that's where I thought would be a great place to kind of start that, and to continue to reference back to, is what was it for that student? What was Missouri looking like in comparison to these other places that we built from state to that nation, even if it's in 1500, what was going on in Missouri when we were also having conquistadors, and in this area made it look like this, and this area made it look like this, and well, how did I don't know how that shapes, but I can see that. Yeah, so
And at the same time, what's happening in Florida, and what's happening out in New Mexico, and what's happening at the same time. So it changes how we perceive. It no longer becomes so dominated by the New England colonies.
I didn't know that we totally conquered Mexico so recently, then gave it back to them. And now they want to redo the rest of it back. Yeah.
Which was Mexican secession. But having taught the regions, having taught regional geography, regional history, regional, economics, with the kids when it used to be in 5th grade. They understood that Missouri was part of that region, which was, how did it compare to the New England region? How did it compare to the Northeast region, which is different from New England actually, but now they've combined it in New England Northeast, and in the Southeast and all that. How did all that relate? And then, of course, you get the Southern state, and it all tied in with the economics of the North and the South, which leads to what? Civil War. So it all got tied in. And as you're moving westward, what happened to population? You can teach government in the fact that why does California have more representatives than Missouri? Area-wise, Missouri and California, looking at that, you can tie all that together. Well, the population. And so railroads, I mean, you talk about transportation, everything can be tied into that with the regions.
Since we have about 15 minutes to go, what I'd like to do in today's discussion, if I know we'd all like to leave these last two done, whether we get there or not, I don't know. But what I would like to do is let's do another talk around about our thinking about 4th grade and how we want to go on those. We can hold them to next time if pages aren't there. I'm not trying to rush the process, but let's do another talk around, see where everybody is. It may be that we want to just list 2 or 3 things like we did on number 2 and come back to that later after we see how it plays out. Okay, let's see, we're gonna start again today. Would you like to
I'd like to yield the rest of
It's like a
I'd like to yield,
Anyone but me.
I'd like to yield the remainder of my time, because I think I've said enough.
I think our intention was good, to keep focused. I don't wanna sound like I'm trying to narrow things down, but I just think I'm trying to do too much. We might need time to look at what other people are doing. I even wondered if I went back to my teachers and said, what are your thoughts? Because they know their kids and they know their stuff. Not that I would be swayed one way or another, but it's nice to have other insight. And just real quick, looking on this other website, they have 2nd grade doing geography, communities, and local government. Then they're doing geography and world communities before they get into 4th grade. Then they start with state, local government, and they jump into Native Americans and do the nation thing. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I think it requires some more thought that can be done right now.
Paul,
Pass.
Patrick?
I'm kind of going, again, I've gone back and forth, I did like when Ralph just said, kind of be laying out more ways that you could use the regions, I do like it. I also worry, if I go back to what Kathy said about things not being in chronological order and jumping around all over the place. And then if we end up talking about things like why we have more representatives in California than we do in Missouri, that actually fits with the Constitution. And that was one of the, compromises within the Constitution on how that all happens. And should that not be something that comes up? So do we, I think some of this is the orders. I also think that to me, this is, I will say, I know these pieces to me are a vital piece, because I really felt like this is what's missing, and it helps me anchor. I think these are the anchors that we're tying those GLAs to. So I like the fact that we spend as much time hashing these out, because I do feel like whatever we put there is vital to what goes underneath it. And it's gonna be that piece that when I keep going back to what Tony said yesterday, what are my 2nd grade teachers supposed to be teaching? I think if you were to look at this right now, you'd say my 1st grade teachers are talking about this, and everything they're doing, it should be fitting with school and the community, and how these different pieces fit within there, and it helps make more sense to people. So I like the fact that we spend as much time on it. I really appreciate the work that's gone into it, even though it's not really answering the question.
So you're really feeling like that's gonna hold us accountable to be consistent with our efforts.
I think this is a missing piece from when I first looked at the standards, to try to, when that was our job for today, I felt like this is what was missing to help make sense of it. So I think it's a vital anchoring piece to help make sense of what we do.
Great.
like this because it feels like we're building a continuum of understanding for kids, and I really like that. It has been a piece we're missing. I would also think that I don't know that regions is, I don't know, I want to be the leader of let's switch to where we think for the regions. So if we're writing these down somewhere, I would want it written down somewhere and just the Craig Carson thinking. But the building of what we build underneath those glees could very much be regional. So I would be fine with state, national, however that would look. I'm not trying to wordsmith, I just don't know.
Early nation, late nation, whatever.
However that looks, yes, but I think what we build underneath it could be still through that same perspective, and how we write it and builds that in. I don't know that Missouri teachers are ready to hit region.
Kathy?
And I'm kind of thinking a little bit from both of those places. I don't think this is by any means wasted work, because I said earlier to some people on break, I feel like if anyone asked me, so did this just thrown together, was there an agenda behind it, I feel like this kind of discussion ensures that that doesn't happen, that we really are working at this.
Right.
I kind of honestly would like to play with it before I label it. So what is it, what is really, do we think collectively is most important for kids to know and to be able to do with these things in 4th and 5th grade? And then let's label them. So I'm not ready to put the label quite yet, because I do feel like we do have a general focus between those grade levels. But
But once we know exactly what's happening, then we kind of like on number 2, once we figure that part out, maybe that'll come secondary.
I'm just looking at it, and just kind of general consensus is, we're gonna talk about nation in both of them anyway. Now, regions aside, how we talk about it regionally and then just nation over here, and possibly, we're gonna talk about that either way. If we could label both of those nations, and then once we start moving things around, like we said about the 2nd grade, we may decide that really doesn't fit. We may want to change that again anyway, just for the, whatever we look at later on. We may, all these don't really line up, but we understand right now that's what we're looking at for our continuum. We're looking at this in our minds, but those labels may actually change. That may not be the label that stays with it, with or in project.
Really don't have anything to add, except I agree that I don't think it's been wasted time.
No, I think it's been great.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add either. I've enjoyed it, and I think we're on the right track. I don't wanna get too lost in putting a finite label onto it just yet. But I think we're all in the same area as far as, I believe, I agree wholeheartedly, I guess it would be Patrick, that I think the nation needs to be split up somehow between a couple of grades and to give it more time. And, I like the direction it's going.
All of you still passing?
Yep.
You want to be the last word this time?
I've said more than enough today.
So, would you do me a favor, Laura? Yes, ma'am. Would you write on one of those green stickies, nation question, and put it on the top of 4th grade? And we will come back and revisit that if this is the will of the group. When we come back next time, or, everybody with me? Make a decision here. All right. We're gonna write nation question on both of those, and we're gonna come back and either decide after our thinking between now and next time, that we want to specify those labels, or that instead we want to just leave them there as we work through the rest of the process and decide that later. Does that sound like comfortable to everybody, or does anyone have any further thoughts on that?
Is it, would this be, I've never looked at any other state standards or how they break this kind of stuff down. Is there anybody, does anybody have any recommendations from another state that I could even look at, just to get an idea where some other states look at things and just,
So the three that I just found, like, right now, I just typed in social studies scope and sequence for elementary, and they just pop up, and everybody's got their own little headers. What you have to keep in mind is, they're gonna have a big header like the ones I just read you. Second grade is geography, communities, local government. That's what our strip is. But underneath there, they go down into more detail on how they break it up for them. So you're gonna wanna look for the scope, okay, of elementary. But yeah, there was one for New York City and North Carolina, and everybody does it different. But it might give you some
I looked
ideas.
at Virginia, and they broke up kindergarten first and second, I believe, in, kind of like we did by,
Expanding horizons.
yeah, expanding horizons. And then after second grade, then it changed. I mean, even the whole, you can look at the whole document, I mean, the whole document's different. It had, okay, kindergarten is gonna be this, first grade is gonna be this, and then second grade is gonna be these, 15 things or whatever. And then after that, it changed completely and went more to a, yeah, well, maybe,
Or a
maybe, I don't
secondary
know, it wasn't
course,
even
maybe.
necessarily that, it was
So,
a different.
I wonder
a
if they're
particular
really
state
different
now,
too.
I don't know a particular state, I
This is
think
state
you just
Virginia.
Google and pull things up.
Right, where they make those breaks.
All right.
You know, our K through, in my school, I don't like it. But K through 3 is embedded social studies.
Into language arts.
Yeah, or whatever, which means they don't teach it at all. And then fourth grade, we have a semester of science, a semester of social studies, and then they all of a sudden have science test in fifth grade, and that's not fair to the teacher. But after the fifth grade, our kids actually have a full year of social studies.
Yeah.
But I like something like this to make it change,
So, thank you all for 2 wonderful days. There are committees that may be jacked up, but we.
We're jacked up on positive.
I'm gonna put that down there right now, I'm laying the gauntlet down. Next time, hopefully Julie will be able to join us. JJ Leak will be joining us. She's a grandmother